Welcome to Spirit Plant Medicine weekly, monthly, however often we do it, when we do it. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time of day it is as you're watching. My name is Mark Curran, and I am here with my good friend and host of the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference, Stephen Gray. And today we are going to be talking about accessibility in the world of psychedelics as things are becoming more open and more legal. And our good friends Tom Hatsis and Eden Woodruff, who are in Oregon, in Portland, have coined a couple of great new terms that we're going to get into and dive into. So we're really happy to have them here, and that's going to be the nature of our conversation. We have done things a little differently where we have invited people to join us here in Zoom, where they can have an opportunity to be part of the conversation when we get into Q&A. And it's just a new format that I'm working with, and I want to see how it goes. So it's something you can look forward to as we move forward with these regular podcasts, video casts, interviews, whatever you want to call them. So Stephen, welcome. Thanks for being here as always. Good to see you.
Thanks, Mark.
Awesome. And we have Tom Hatsis and Eden Woodruff joining us, which is fantastic. And they've coined a couple of great terms. As you can see, I'm going to move out of the way so you can see my image back here. Profit-delics, which I thought was really fantastic. And I like their name in their conference, the Pay What You Canference. I love that too. And just the simple phrase that non-accessible is not acceptable. And that's going to be the focus of our conversation today as we talk about what's happening in the world of psychedelics and therapy and things of that nature. So welcome to the program.
Thanks for having us, Mark and Stephen. I did need to clear one thing up. We did not coin the word Profit-delic. That's kind of been kicked around for a bit, but Eden did coin the Pay What You Canference.
Awesome. Well, you brought it to my reality anyways, and I thought it was really timely, and it made sense because some of the things that, as the organizer of Spirit Plant Medicine, Stephen and I have had many conversations around pricing and profit and accessibility and sustainability. And I know that that's something that's near and dear to both of your hearts as well with the initiatives you have down in Portland. So maybe you can tell people kind of what you're up to. Last time we spoke with you, we were talking about your thrift store to support accessibility. So maybe you can give us an update on what's going on. And you just got back from the conference in the UK. So maybe you can give us an update of the highlights there as well.
Sure. You want to start off with our Sanctum Thrift?
Sure. Yeah. So the last time we spoke with you, we were fundraising for our Kickstarter to open the thrift store, and we made our goal. Thankfully, with the support of you and many others rallied together for that. The thrift store is a nonprofit raising funds for psychedelic assisted therapy. So people who are interested in this medicine but find the price tag much too high, we are offering grants for them. In the state of Oregon, psychedelic assisted therapy is legal now. Centers are opening, but the centers for one session, it's up to $3,500. So we're looking at ways to fill the gap and support other organizations that are with the indigenous traditions. Tom can say more about that.
Yeah, the first two, we have two meetings coming up in June for two different nonprofits. One of them is called Uphold Our Troops, and their model is based around giving veterans psilocybin-assisted facilitator training. And they're going to branch out from that to start giving these life-changing medicines to vets. And so we're going to be supporting them in those efforts. And another friend and colleague of ours, Joel Breer, who's in Mexico, he's a facilitator as well, but he's also very much involved with an organization that works to preserve indigenous medicines. As I'm sure many of us know, peyote is in danger of going extinct. The Sonora desert toad will probably be extinct in the next 5 to 10 years if things aren't done about it. And I know some other people are out there working to preserve them. And this is another organization that aligns with our values. So we're going to be helping fund them as well. And more to come as the laws and parameters for psilocybin or otherwise psychedelic assisted therapy broadens, we're going to be broadening our mission with how much the laws allow.
Mm-hmm. What about, I have two questions of other ways of, going at this that I'm just kind of wondering about if you guys have considered or for which there are any options at all. And one is, short of actual quote unquote therapy, is it, presumably it would be not expensive, or maybe it wouldn't cost anything if you had a bunch of trained volunteers to be sitters. Is that in the kit bag anywhere, the idea of having sitters?
So right now, legally, the only way you can take psilocybin is in the psilocybin service centers with a licensed facilitator. So outside of that model, it's not legal, but mushrooms and all drugs actually have been decriminalized in the state of Oregon. So if you're caught with them and there's no intent to distribute or sell, then you'd only receive a $100 fine.
Which is still ridiculous, by the way.
Still ridiculous, but
better than prison.
It's better than
Right.
prison. And, if the facilitator or trip sitter, as long as they're not the one providing the psilocybin, there's really no risk to them.
Right.
So
I wonder what the police's attitude is there too. Like in Vancouver, they've said it out loud. They're deprioritizing,
Right.
Paying attention to this kind of activity.
Yeah, we had a little bit of a mishap coming back from Spirit Plant Medicine Conference. We got illegally searched at the border, and due to the nature of our work and the things we're involved in, we happened to have a tiny little bit of psilocybin in like a little eyeglasses case or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so that was pretty nerve-wracking as we were sitting in the office waiting for them to decide our fate over this. And they called the local sheriff of whatever the town is in Washington. I forget the name.
Blaine, maybe?
Blaine?
I was just happy to get out of there, to be honest with you. I don't remember what it was. But the truly, I mean, magical
What did the sheriff say?
Here's what the sheriff said. He was kind of on Eden and my side. He was talking to the Fed saying, how he has, Army veteran friends and police officer friends that actually are using psilocybin secretly because of its legal status and, and also the just the stigma around it. And so he essentially said that he's like, I recognize these as the medicines that they are. I'm not going to bust you guys, but I have no control over the feds. But his message reached the feds and they ended up letting us go. And I don't know, that was pretty awesome, that the message that all of us who are kind of doing the grassroots work, it is actually reaching the people in authoritative quote unquote positions, and they're seeing what we all see about these medicines, that they are life-saving and they do help with trauma and PTSD and things like that, depression.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's just a great story of, the border of all places, because we know there is zero tolerance, right?
Yeah.
And that, how long did that whole process take?
We were there for hours.
Yeah.
It was like the middle of the night, like, I don't know,
Oh,
3 or 4 hours just sitting there, like, shaking, just waiting. And the fact that it was an illegal search in the first place didn't offer us any protection at all.
Well, just so people know, can you maybe, because I was always under the impression when you're at the border, they can do whatever the hell they want. So what makes a legal versus illegal search, just as a sidebar?
There has to be probable cause. I can't speak for how the laws work on the Canadian side, but once we enter the US side, the police officers need probable cause, and that needs to be readily apparent. For example, they smell cannabis coming out of the car, or they smell alcohol in the person's breath. We didn't have any cannabis or alcohol. And so there was no reason to search the car. Like, we didn't we didn't give them probable cause to search, and they did anyway.
Well, it's a good thing you didn't go with that great big mushroom that I saw a video of from the VIP
Yes,
party or the after
yes,
party.
yes. Very
Good
good
thing
thing
you
we did not
gifted
try to
that to
do
a friend.
Yeah, there was actually this funny story though. Just what happened was, I went out to my car to just while they were searching it to get the little bit of money that I had, because one of the officers like, you want to probably get that. So I went out there, and as I was going, that's when the officer pulled out the little case that had the mushrooms, and he's like, "What's this?" And I'm literally wearing a name tag that with my name on it that says Spirit Plant Medicine Conference. Going, oh, I don't know what those are. It's like, well, the name tag says otherwise.
That's
Yeah.
funny.
So, getting back to what you guys are actually doing, specifically, how do you intend to make this medicine accessible for, little or no money, or make it accessible, period?
Yeah, so the organizations we're working with Uphold Our Troops, the funds from the thrift store go directly to that organization first, with the facilitator training, training vets to become facilitators, and then they're going to move into scholarships for vets to also receive the psychedelic assisted therapy as well. We're looking to also work with other nonprofits that make it accessible. There are more and more popping up, so we're excited to work with them, not just with psilocybin, but with ketamine assisted therapy, and hopefully soon MDMA assisted therapy, as it's like slated to become legal federally pretty soon, we hope.
Yeah, it's pretty much leading the race right now between MDMA and psilocybin. MDMA is far further along to becoming federally legal, and here in the States, ketamine is already legal. So we reached out to another organization, a nonprofit that does ketamine assisted therapy, and we're just waiting to hear back and sort of hammer out the details of, how we can move forward.
For people that aren't familiar with the effects of ketamine or how it works in therapy, have you guys taken it yourselves, and do you know how it works that way?
I've heard remarkable things. I'm actually interested in trying it myself. I've heard remarkable things for treatment-resistant depression. Yeah, great testimonies. We have some facilitators at our healing center here in Portland. So yeah, and they're also working within that organization that we're trying to raise funds for.
Yeah, I don't personally have any experience with ketamine, but I do have experience with henbane and mandrake, and they're kind of similar.
That's a pair of comedians, isn't it?
Yeah,
Hendrik and Henry.
the psychedelic and entheogenic. No.
Yeah.
Well, I've had experience with ketamine.
Oh.
I sat in ceremony a couple of times. It was done in a ceremonial setting. It was a group, and it was intramuscular, so it was actually injected. And I gotta say, I was hesitant. I was unsure. I've heard things, both good and bad, about ketamine. In terms of like just from the people who do it from a recreational point of view to therapeutics, very different. And I've heard so many stories on all of that spectrum. And I got to tell you, it was one of the most peaceful, enjoyable, just there was a disconnection and a oneness. It was like took me outside my body. And I was just at this level of peace where I was still conscious. I was still fully aware, but I had this disconnection that just felt like a rest. It was like a deep rest that was just so, it was like a very, very deep meditative state.
Yeah, sweet. Yeah, they call it a dissociative,
Right.
actually. Yeah. So on the notion of what Mark just said about, the good and the bad, as it were, I have heard, and I don't remember the details, but that there's been some press, which isn't good, about like more, I don't know, more addiction, more crime, more problems since this decriminalization thing has happened in Oregon. And if that's true, as I say, I just breezed on a couple of things quickly. That would seem to potentially be, putting some brakes on the forward movement of all that. What do you guys think about all that?
Well, one of the things that we weren't allowed to do, or we weren't allowed to say during the campaigns to get these medicines decriminalized, is that there's a difference between certain drugs and others. We were more or less made to pretend that methamphetamine and cannabis are essentially the same thing, which is interesting because I remember not 5 years ago, we were all saying, how could the FDA be so stupid as to put cannabis as a Schedule 1? Well, somehow the script has flipped, and now people are saying, well, it should be. They're all the same thing. And I know it's an unpopular opinion, but I don't believe they're the same thing, because I have never met a person that tests their fentanyl just in case there's some psilocybin in it. I don't know about too many ayahuasca-related drive-by shootings. I don't know of any of those. And sorry,
it was a well-meaning movement, but there hasn't been the support in place. People were using Portugal as a model, but in Portugal they have safe injection sites. They have more supports, and there's actually like social pressure to not to do these hard drugs in public. And here and you'll be arrested in Portugal for creating an open drug scene in public, and here they've just gone rampant. The police are overwhelmed. They don't have the resources, so it wasn't rolled out very thoughtfully, unfortunately. And so there is a lot of blowback now because of it, and I understand it. Honestly.
A lot of people thought that with decriminalization, we were going to get naked hippies throwing a frisbee in the park. Instead, what we got are hard drug addicts shooting up on our front porch. And it's because we weren't allowed to say, hey, let's decriminalize things like mushrooms, ayahuasca, iboga, those sorts of things, true plant medicines and fungal medicines. What's that?
Something came in there. We didn't say anything.
Oh, sorry.
There was an alien voice came in. That is terrible, isn't it?
Well, it's just that these people need help, not encouragement to continue living dangerous lifestyles. And we both have a lot of compassion for this issue, but how we go about it, it's going to take a little bit of truth and maybe perhaps some tough love, but it's done because we actually do care. And giving, somebody struggling with these substances, essentially my tax dollars to go buy those substances is really not the best strategy, in my opinion.
Is there a best strategy?
Yes, I think that we should be allowed to say that there are major differences between ayahuasca and heroin. And I'm not saying that when people talk about psychedelic exceptionalism, they don't mean that psychedelics are exceptional or people that use psychedelics are exceptional. What they're saying is that some of these things are very obviously more dangerous than other ones. And that comes down to the individual. I know plenty of people who have drunk ayahuasca who are absolutely insufferable people. And I also know a few recreational heroin users who are good fathers, they're great husbands, they're standout members of their community, they have good jobs, and they just like recreational heroin use every now and then. So it's like, I don't want to make it sound like it's the substance itself that determines. It's the individual's relationship with a substance, and it's just based on what I've seen, it's far easier to fall into the harsher sides of these substances with certain things like methamphetamine, crack, and heroin than it is things like cannabis, mushrooms, or ayahuasca.
Of course.
And I don't know anybody who is going to a heroin facilitator because their ayahuasca addiction is ruining their life. I don't know who that person is. And until somebody can show me just one person like that, I am going to continue to believe that there is a difference between these different kinds of substances.
Yeah, it goes without saying,
Completely
doesn't it?
agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what you're speaking to is just common sense based on what's out there. And are you familiar with Carl Hart's work?
I am. I
Right.
am.
I saw him speak here in Vancouver one time, and it was just brilliant because he was basically talking about what you were talking about in terms of the responsible, all the people who use substances responsibly that you'd never know, even when you told your story about crossing the border, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, these people are using these things responsibly, but you wouldn't know. Doctors, lawyers, professionals, whatever that may be, judges, all of that thing, all of those. And yet it's the stigma of what we see on the street and the damage that it's doing. And then we see that even the programs that are out there for, substance abuse aren't working. And what do we see that works? Plant medicines, right? Iboga and, ayahuasca is, powerful with addiction as well. So I think it's the tide's turning, and it takes these conversations and real-time research, which is what I love about what's happening now, is there's so much research out there that is now being able to prove it for all the psychedelic or the scientific minds and things of that nature that I think is important as this moves forward. But what we're seeing, and we all know because it's what we're the world we live in these days, is there are tangible, measurable results.
Agreed.
Right. And that's where you're saying, and this is what I love about what you're saying about accessibility. As we all know, mushrooms aren't expensive. If you can go pick them and forage them as a animal of nature, right? As a human being of nature, that doesn't subscribe to these laws. The bear can go eat whatever it wants. The deer can go eat whatever it wants, right? It's not illegal for them, but it becomes challenging for us.
Right.
And so accessibility, when you take a look at the mass populace, it's one thing people who have the means, but today where it's such a challenge within the economic climate of, the world really, that there's a lot of people who could benefit from this work, this therapy, this medicine, whatever we want to call it. Yet when all of a sudden it becomes $1,200 for a session or $2,000 for a session, how does that person who's making minimum wage or just struggling to get by afford it?
Yeah.
Right.
I think that, things are going to morph and change. I think that this is a brand new world with psychedelics. And I think that the current model, people are working it out, and we're going to fill the gaps where we can. I totally support decriminalization and people learning to grow their own, friends sitting for trusted friends. Another thing we also raise funds for is integration, support, and education. The funds we raise, they go to help make our conference accessible. All of the integration circles we hold monthly and the talks that we give, we try to make those as accessible as we can. So as you know, Mark, these experiences, the real work begins after the experience. And so, we're there every week holding our open mic, creating community. And so, it's about creating the community and the structure to support people having these experiences as well. It's a big part of it.
It's
Wonderful.
fantastic.
Yeah.
So you mentioned your conference that's coming up again here July 21st to 23rd in the wonderful city of Portland, Oregon. I had the pleasure of being there for your last one in 2019, and it was fantastic. And unfortunately, I won't be able to be there in person with you this year because unlike you, your American guys don't let me across the border without the right paperwork, and my paperwork lapsed over the COVID seasons, and it takes a year to get it done. And as funny story, just as a funny story for all those people out there listening, especially in Canada, it was one joint when I was 18 that stops me from crossing the border. One joint.
It's
Right?
ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah. And it wasn't until I was 45 years old, been crossing the border for years. And one day they just said, nope. and that was that. But I will be there in spirit. I know you're going to do an interactive event, so I'm gonna, hang out in your Zoom room and be the character that I am. But tell us about your event, the Pay What You Can friends. I love it. Don't say it too loudly because Stephen might want to jump on board with that.
Yeah, it's just the Pay What You Can friends is just an extension of our larger mission of making not just the medicines but information about them accessible. So we developed kind of a new model for conferences, for a conference that is totally sponsor supported, that people, different conscious businesses who agree with our stance that these medicines and information to them should be accessible to everyone. And by doing that, we're able to keep our ticket prices low and also somewhat high for people who don't have the financial means but would like to come, and those who do have the financial means who, by giving a little bit more, ensure that the person without financial means can get in. So essentially, those who buy a higher ticket, thank you so much for coming, but also thank you again because you just made it possible for somebody else who doesn't have the financial means to come too. So yeah, I think there's a $50 tier, a $75, $125, $250, and $500, because it's also a fundraiser for our Sanctum Thrift and Psychedelic Education Center.
Nice. So tell us about the actual conference, like what's the format, etc.
Sure. Do you want to go for it, or do you want
Sure.
me to
Well, it's 2 full days. Talks about 20 speakers. About 20 speakers.
About that, yeah.
Stephen Gray will be there.
Stephen will be one of them.
Dennis McKenna, the Dank Duchess,
Acacia Lewis,
Petey
Newman, Kobe Michael,
Baba Masha.
I love that Baba. Is Baba Masha going to be there in person?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Stephen, you got to connect with this woman. I saw a film on her on YouTube maybe a week or two ago as I was just doing my own research. She's quite interesting, and she's big on the Amanita mushroom, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Tom wrote the forward to her book.
No, I didn't write I wrote an endorsement.
Endorsement, yes.
Nice.
Yes.
I'm not forward worthy yet, but I'm still on endorsements, but I'll get there.
Is Amanita worthy of a lot of conversation? Like speaking of accessibility,
very.
How many people are likely to be able to make use of it?
I think lots of people can make use of it. It has tremendous medicinal value, especially for minor aches and pains. It pretty much cured my sleep apnea. It's also good for cuts, bruises, itching, burning. People make Amanita ointments, rub it on, and it's like the itching is just gone. In fact, we tried it out with our friend Martin Ball when I was in Ashland recording the Witches Ointment. He had gotten some kind of skin rash or something that was just driving him crazy, and we put the Amanita on it, and the itch went away. The redness was still there, but the annoying part, the itching, was gone.
And it's been there's been reports of it being really helpful for people in recovery.
Oh yeah.
Amanita Dreamer is another big voice for Amanita muscaria on YouTube, and she swears by it for helping her addiction to benzodiazepine.
Wow.
So benzodiazepine. So I think it holds a lot of promise, and that's what the book is about. Baba Masha's book is the studies she did in over 2 years, and how it helped people in a variety of different ways.
So are these more like psycholytic type doses? You were describing, topicals and different things like that. And obviously, it has a historical, a somewhat fraught historical story, as it were. That it can be quite poisonous. And also, I don't know, psychologically dangerous for some people. What do you know about that aspect of it?
So as far as it being poisonous, it's the Amanita muscaria is poisonous the way a steak that hasn't been cooked could be poisonous. As long as the Amanita is prepared, which essentially just means drying it, just dehydrating it, then it's not going to harm you. As far as the different dosages that Baba Masha's survey aim to tally. It was everything between like 0.05, so like a microdose, and upwards of, like a full-on, Terrence McKenna hero dose, and everything in between.
And what kind of effect? It's quite different. It's not a tryptamine hallucinogen. It's not a phenethylamine or whatever that word is that I never quite pronounce right.
It's kind of closer to, like, people would call it a dissociative,
A deliriant.
yeah, or a deliriant, maybe somewhat similar to ketamine. Again, one of the reasons I've never done ketamine is because before I mentioned henbane and mandrake, I also do ayahuasca. Wow, Amanita muscaria almost every day.
Really?
And actually, the other night, as far as effects that are kind of odd, I was laying in bed. I took a pretty sizable dose, and I was staring out my window and had the window open, this very beautiful, cool spring going into summer breeze coming in. And I was just enjoying looking at my window. And then I was like, wait a minute, your eyes are closed. And then I opened my eyes, and it was like the same thing that I had been looking at was all right there. And I was like, what? Like, but it's Amanita can be like that. It's interesting like that. And I would say that you absolutely can take entheogenic doses of it. Some people will say that it's not entheogenic. They haven't taken a high enough dose, in my opinion, because I have, and I had one of the deepest entheogenic experiences of my life about a month ago with Amanita muscaria,
Wow.
or 2 months ago,
Hmm.
about now, yeah.
Great. Well, that was another great sidetrack on that subject. I think there's a lot we can talk about because I think it's not often talked about as much as it could be. And it's something I know living in Vancouver and BC, you see them growing here every fall,
Yeah,
Mhm.
right?
yeah, on the campus.
Yeah, and learning how to
Exactly.
get that medicine into the people's hands. It's great that that's still legal. We go foraging every year. It's our favorite thing to do in the fall, and I love to
You know,
educate
I
people
see
about
all
the
your
benefits.
posts. Tom, keep your
Yeah.
pants on. No.
I can't help myself. I love this mushroom.
Well, it's one of the things I love
Pants come
about you,
off.
Tom, is your playfulness, right?
What's that?
So one of the things I do love about you is your playfulness. So
Oh, thank you.
yeah, fantastic. So I know we went on a sidetrack there, but more about the conference.
That's not a sidetrack. That's part of their conference.
Oh,
That's
okay.
true.
Well, good point, Stephen. Thanks for
1 point for me.
Yes.
Not that we're keeping points, because I don't know how many I have. Anyways,
Yeah.
so what more? This starts on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I think we got
Mhm.
to Baba Masha
Yeah.
on your speaker list there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Solana Booth, who I believe had spoken at SPMC. Absolutely, I don't have to tell you how wonderful she is. Absolutely incredible person. We also have
The ketamine
okay,
pedal
yeah.
panel. We're having some of our ketamine therapists they're going to be speaking on ketamine at the conference, and then a psychedelic arts panel. We're hosting this at the beautiful Haven / Jaja PDX in Portland, and it's a gorgeous visionary art collective. So we're going to be having a panel with some of the artists there, and Cacique.
Yeah, Cacique Antonio has one of the most remarkable stories I've heard in a while. He's from the inner city in New York, and he chose mushrooms over the trappings of inner city life, and helps others kind of escape those trappings through entheogenic experiences. So I'm really excited to have him out here, and absolute sweetheart of a guy.
Hmm.
Excellent.
And I'm very excited for the cannabis ceremony on
Yes.
Saturday night.
Yeah, Stephen will be hosting a
Mhm.
cannabis ceremony on Saturday night. So we'll have, the range of talks. We'll break for dinner, and then we'll come back, and Stephen will lead us all to further enlightenment.
Just like the ones we've been doing at the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference for the last 3-4 years.
Mhm.
If anyone who's watching or listening to this has been to that conference, they'll know what we're doing for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think it's a beautiful way, because one of the things that I always believe experience is the best teacher. We could read all the books, we can memorize and study as much as we want, but it's more of an intellectual based recitation of information versus an experiential intake of the information that creates the experience that then leads to transformation. And that's one of the things that I love that we started doing at the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference back in 2018, because it had just become legal here in Canada. So we had that great opportunity to do that and to hear the feedback from people and the experiences that they were having. And it was something else to see all, all these high profile speakers and everybody out there in this, everybody's out there, imbibing and enjoying the sacrament of cannabis for the ceremony. And I think it's always a great way when you can bring experience in to these conferences. So Stephen Gray, good on you, my friend.
Yeah.
Well, Tom invited and I said yes.
I always loved the ceremonial aspect of SPMC. Like I remember the first year I attended, I think it was 2017.
In the old room.
In the back of the old room.
Yeah.
And that year there was like a ring at the very end, and like
yes.
Yeah, people held hands and went through
there was like a
the building
snake dance of sorts, didn't we?
Yes.
All join and dance all the way around. Yeah.
I think that was Kateri Walker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
and I just came home from that weekend and I was buzzing. I was so high from that experience, and that really changed my idea of what a conference experience could be like. And I really love that, and I'm inspired by that, and I want to bring. I'm stealing your these ideas are just too good, and want to bring it bring that magic in with us.
Well, we're importing the idea.
Well, hey, if something works, do more of it, as I always learned.
Absolutely.
Model, learn from the the giants of the shoulders we stand on, and bring that experience. So that's awesome. What else do you have going on? Is there anything else you want to share specifically that we want to touch base? I want to give an opportunity to our in-studio folks. We've got a few people here. If they have any questions, I'd like to take some questions from the audience. And if you do have any questions, for those of you watching here in Zoom, if you want to turn on your cameras, raise your digital hand so we can see you. If you have a question for Tom, Eden, or even Stephen, it's a great opportunity.
Even Stephen.
Yes.
Even Stephen.
Even Stephen.
But that's great. And what when it comes down to the conference here in Portland, is there anything specific? If there's one specific thing that you wanted the world to know about this, what would that be?
I would say that we don't have to abide by the Profit-delic model, and we don't have to abide by exclusionary practices, and we just have to get a little creative as to how to deal with them. With these kinds of issues. And we're hoping that if we can make this sort of conference model work, that it will, hopefully other psychedelic societies will adopt it as well, to see that, this actually can be done in a way that's totally, as accessible as it possibly can be for as many people as it possibly can be.
Nice. Yeah. On the logistical level, obviously you've made it very affordable for people that don't have a lot of spare funds, but for people that would come from farther away, do you have any suggestions for accommodation, reasonably priced accommodation for people coming into town?
Yeah, we started looking at a few hotels, and I just have to look at a few more. And we'll be releasing that when we have one that's just a better option. And by better option, I mean close to the venue, but also inexpensive, but not cheap, but just affordable.
Are there any decent hostels there?
There used to be. The Hawthorne one was right there. I'm not aware of any off the top of my head. Hostels.
Yeah, I'm not either.
Okay.
I
Well,
just
one of
lived
the
in my
great
car.
ways I've found that always worked for me when I travel is, in the different Facebook or social media groups, you get a group of people to like Airbnb a whole house, right? And it gets to be very affordable. You get a nice place to stay and you get to meet some really cool people. So it's just a suggestion for people out there looking, because if we talk about inclusion and community building, that's certainly one good way to go, right?
Truth.
Absolutely. So, Tom, we have a question from Karen S. She says, going back to Amanita, she'd like to know how you used it to cure your sleep apnea.
Oh, I didn't have to do much at all. I just had to take Amanita before I went to sleep. That
Any
was pretty
specific
much it. That's a
dosage?
great question, bud. What's that?
Any specific dosage that you were taking, or?
Yeah, I would usually, you know what, I have it right here. Usually a spoonful, like a small teaspoon about, not too much. You'll also have very, very vivid and lucid dreams from Amanita muscaria. And actually working on a book right now that kind of goes into all that and how to use sort of occult technologies and sort of witchcraft along with mushrooms like Amanita muscaria and psilocybin to get the most out of them.
Well, since we seem to be encouraging, granting entry to Amanita into the psychedelic pantheon, are there more specifics that you might tell people about how to make sure they're being safe with this and that they do prepare it properly?
Absolutely.
And can I add one thing to that question, because it can be, because I understand that there's the true Amanita and there's like a one that wants to be an Amanita when it grows up or something like there's one that looks like it but isn't. Is that true?
So one of the awesome things about the Amanita muscaria is that there are no known deadly lookalikes. I mean, the ones that are propped up as deadly lookalikes would be the Amanita virosa and the Amanita phalloides, and they don't actually look anything like an Amanita muscaria. And some have brought up Russula medica as well as an Amanita lookalike, but it really doesn't. I mean, that's one of the thing about Amanita muscaria that's so awesome is when you're looking at an Amanita muscaria. It's like, would a Smurf build a house out of it? Yup. Well, then it's an Amanita muscaria.
Okay, so then you cut it off at the ground, and then what do you do?
So the best way to stay safe as far as with Amanita, like Eden brought up our friend and colleague Amanita Dreamer earlier, and one of the things she says that I agree with is that the Amanita muscaria is an advanced mushroom. It's not like psilocybin, in that psilocybin mushrooms, by and large, like a psilocybin mushroom that's this size and one that's this size will have the same amount of psilocybin in it. Whereas with Amanita muscaria, you could find a cap this big, like a big Amanita muscaria, and one tiny one right next to it. And that tiny one is loaded with ibotenic acid, which is what's converted into muscimol during the decarboxylation process. And the larger one won't have much ibotenic acid in it at all. So the size can be deceiving. How you get around that to stay safe, or at least how I do it, is I pulverize, after the mushrooms are dried, I pulverize it because that homogenizes the dosage.
Right. And so you want to get, so we bought a $40 dehydrator and put it in for about 8 hours at the highest, almost this highest setting,
165.
165 Fahrenheit, right?
I don't know.
And
165.
Okay. And until it's bone dry, it has to be bone dry. And that's when the ibotenic acid is converted to muscimol.
Yeah.
And so that's when it's safe. It's not going to make you your stomach upset, but it's still going to give you that experience depending on how much you take.
Yeah. And I would also say, just with my own experiences, it's a little, you're more likely to have what we call an oops moment with dosage with Amanita muscaria than you are with other things, because again, it's highly erratic, like as far as like there's no uniformity to these mushrooms, and that's what makes them advanced. And what I did, and this is how, I mean, I would suggest to anybody interested. When we first went amanita picking, I didn't eat them for a while. I would sit with them in my lap when I meditated. I would sing to them. Eden and I would make art and do these photo shoots that Mark was talking about earlier with them. I just opened the door to that conversation. And it was only like after doing that, as I like to say, the mushroom spirits finally started talking to me. And I started off again with just, a small little teaspoon every night before bed, specifically for sleep apnea. And I also happen to love the taste. There was one night that I had to give Eden my amanita because I was just like an ice cream, kind of thing. Yeah, so then I would start to slowly introduce the amanita to your body. That's what I would recommend. Don't try to go for a big dose right away. Your body does need to get used to it first. You want to form
build up
a relationship, really. You want to have a relationship with it first, and then it shall reveal all its secrets.
So what, I don't mean to go too far to the negative here, but if you overdo it, what's the problem with that? What could happen?
You might feel like I have overdone it in a way that I have had one pretty negative experience with amanita, but I was smoking cannabis on top of it, and I was also drinking alcohol on top of it, which was not intelligent at all.
Terrible combo.
Yeah, it was not smart at all. So I don't really blame the mushroom or the alcohol, the cannabis. I blame me for having done something so foolish.
Right.
But with my experience overdosing on Amanita muscaria, I pretty much lost all motor function and coordination. And I really had to go to the bathroom. And I was pretty much on this sort of adventure because we're on the top floor here and there's one bathroom that's downstairs. And I was essentially squiggling and slithering like a worm across my house trying to get to the bathroom. And it was... I experienced vertigo, which was not fun. So like trying to slither to get to a bathroom while everything's kind of spinning around you was not fun. I never felt nauseous though, which is, it's interesting because that's one of the things people normally talk about with Amanita overdoses. They'll talk about the nausea, but I didn't experience that at all. It was mostly just like the vertigo and not being able to like control my arms or legs or anything like that. Is like that sucked. But,
no kidding. Yeah.
But it was, again, like that's one of many experiences I've had. And it again, it was more my fault of stacking other things on top of it. So I wouldn't say then that I've ever had a pure Amanita overdose yet.
But you are cautioning people that way.
Yeah, absolutely. This is what could potentially happen if you take too much. So just be really careful and make sure that you slowly introduce it to your body. I also jumped the gun. I was excited to take a psychedelic dose of it. So I took way more than I should have. And again, it was just my fault.
So if we have time for another question, can you talk a little bit about proper dosages for psychedelic or for psilocybin work that you're trying to encourage?
Sure. It depends on what the person is going for. Are they looking for a microdose experience kind of thing, or like the cosmos opening up in your living room kind of experience?
And for like the veterans, for example, I mean, what are there sort of recommended levels of that, along that gradation? People that are experiencing PTSD, do they need to have these sort of, kind of like the Johns Hopkins work where, you sort of have these breakthrough experiences and you see that you're connected to the eternal source and it's all good and all that. And then you come back and you feel sort of this total relief or whatever that is, right?
Yeah, I think that's about an eighth is what they give. Which is about an eighth.
An eighth of a gram?
No, 3.5
grams. So 3.5 grams.
Oh, okay, right.
That's typically
you guys are Americans. You talk in ounces.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Sorry, Mark. You were going to come in there.
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you, Tom, for just your complete transparency and honesty and saying, it was me. It was my irresponsibility. I don't know if
Oh,
you
it
used
was.
that word, but I think it's important to acknowledge that. And Vanessa had a comment as well in the comments where she says that in regards to different substances, it's not just she doesn't think it's just the individual's use of the substances or the substances themselves that's play. US and Portugal have very different social structures, such as access to healthcare, poverty levels, and welfare systems. So, there's a lot of, factors into what makes.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Right.
Sure.
And when the bill was being proposed, they were using Portugal as an example, but they weren't, it wasn't the whole picture, obviously.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, if we had all those services in place, it would be a different landscape out here.
Yeah.
So,
And one of the reasons why and it's something that I'll definitely look more into, of why I don't necessarily look never mind. It's
Oh,
not important.
yeah.
Oh,
Well, we don't need to go into this, but obviously, just the general addiction and poverty and homelessness problem is a much bigger issue than specifically to do with drugs, quote unquote, right?
Sure, that's
It's
kind of what
it's
I
an
was.
endemic problem that just is extremely difficult to deal with in modern societies, and their heads are always trying to go, oh, what do we do with this?
Yeah.
Affordable housing, therapy, whatever, all these things.
Yeah,
you gotta
but
look at what works, right? Anywhere in the world, what works. And if there's one thing I think we'd probably all agree on from the studies and things that we see, so many people grow up with trauma and challenges and everything that they face in life. Our society is so fractured that way. Yet community seems to be what brings people together in that way, where there's less usage even, right? So it's how do we take what we know works, that we see in other countries and other communities and other practices, and be doing more of that, because there are homeless people out there who aren't on alcohol, aren't on
I was
drugs.
just going to say that.
They're
Yeah.
just don't want to be in the rat race. They don't want to be in that.
Sure, but that is a
So-
minority.
No,
Yes,
yes,
it is. Yeah.
That is a minority.
I agree.
Very
I'm
much.
just saying,
Yeah.
I'm
Very
just
much a
saying
minority.
they are out there.
Oh, of course.
That's
And
all
I
I'm
would
saying.
also, there's something you touched upon, Mark, that I agree with, that I kind of wanted to say before, but I couldn't think of a succinct way to put it, but you kind of just did for me in a little bit. There are people living in poverty that do not have these issues, and there are middle class and above people who do. So that's why I tend to, I tend to leave that argument aside until there's no other explanation for something, because there are so many other factors that, just in my opinion, and I'm not, the global authority on this or anything, but from what I've seen, there's poverty can play a role, and sometimes it doesn't play a role at all. And in other cases, a middle class life is literally what is playing the role. Somebody who has a job they don't like, they don't have a strong community. I think community is actually the most
that's
important.
what I was going to add, is that
it's
community.
I agree.
Is more than everything.
And especially after an experience like this,
Yeah.
and going back to a job you might be doing really well at financially, but you just can't stand, and just having to go back to the grind, like you really
Spiritually
need
bankrupt.
a community that understands who, you need to find the others at that point. And then I think we can and collaborate with others and find new ways, and that's what we're trying to do here, is find new ways, innovative ways to bring information to people and medicine. So
Well, it's fantastic what you're doing, really. It's definitely forward thinking. One might even say revolutionary.
And we're always happy to share your work as we move forward in what we're doing, and creating a better everyday life for the many people. That's really what it is. And what works for some doesn't always work for others, but we have to keep, it's change your approach. That's the ultimate success formula, right? Know what you want, and then change your approach until you get it, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's not about giving up. It's about, okay, that didn't work. What can I do next? That didn't, or that might get you further along. What can I do next? And model and look what's worked for other people. It's one of the best ways is to see what has worked for others and see if that's something that works for you. And that's in all aspects of life, right?
Yeah.
And thank you so much for supporting us, being a part of this thing, our last conference and this conference. And
no, it's our
amazing
pleasure. And Stephen's going to be down there doing what he does best, which is going to be fantastic. So maybe before we sign off, because I got something I'm going to say towards the end as well. And I want to share Sharon's comment that she put here as well. She's just a comment rather than a question, because she's starting to see a sliding scale for ceremonial plant medicine offerings here on the west coast of Canada. And she's hoping that it starts to spread to make it more accessible to those with limited funds. So I think it's a beautiful segue. Exactly. Yeah. Thank you for that, Shannon. That's a beautiful segue to maybe put out another invitation for all of those people who are curious, who want to know more, and to meet people and build community within your event. So let us give it to us one more time, Tom and Eden.
Go for it.
What?
Invitation to your conference, the Pay What You Can friends. I love it.
Maybe contact info, like where people look. Yeah.
Sure.
Exactly.
So this July 21st to 23rd, we are putting on the Psanctum Psychedelic Pay What You Can Friends. You can find out more information about us on psanctum.org. That's PSANCTUM. So just Sanctum with a P in the front, because we love psilocybin. And it was obvious. So sanctum.org, or if you go to Eventbrite and just put PSANCTUM, Sanctum into the search engine, will be, I think we're the only thing that comes up, because we're the only people that don't know how to spell sanctum properly. So
and people can buy tickets right there online.
And, people can buy tickets. We have live stream tickets available, and again, we have tickets as low as $50 or as high as $500 if you would like to sponsor somebody else being able to get into the conference and you have the financial means. This is the push, and this is the time to show everyone that we do care about making this stuff accessible. And as we say, not accessible is not acceptable.
Well, I just like to, put my second that emotion, so to speak, by saying to anyone watching or listening, you could do far worse than supporting this. This is an initiative that can change society, step by step, of course, but it's a great way to spend a little money.
And learn more. If you're curious,
I
encourage everybody to, and you've made it affordable, so it's definitely accessible for the many. And if you are watching this, wherever you're watching this, whenever you're watching this, you're interested, take a look around. There are links to sanctumpsychedelics.org somewhere around there in the event. I threw it in the chat for the folks who are here with us in Zoom. And I just want to say, not that I'm stealing your thunder, but in the spirit of what you're speaking of, because Stephen and I have this conversation so often about affordability, about sustainability, and not about, the gouging and making things expensive. And, as you both know, Tom and Eden, events aren't cheap to put on, and costs are definitely going up. We've seen that in spirit plant medicine as well. And we always want to make things affordable as well. So my thing, I just want to put out there, and this is just a nugget for anybody watching really after June 30th. I want to support what you guys are doing, because we're offering 50% off early bird tickets right now. And if anybody's watching this at any time when those tickets are not on their early bird special, and you're watching this and you want to get an affordable price because you're limited as well, reach out to me directly at mark@spiritplantmedicine.com, and I will honor that 50% discount till the very end. But you have to reach out to me personally.
Sweetheart.
All right. Well,
Mark likes to meet people.
Yeah, and we want to, make it affordable and accessible, just as you guys do.
course.
right? Our goal is to, not have to sell tickets at regular price, because we don't want to do that, because we know that it is limited for people. And we really want to acknowledge the work that you guys are doing, and really your generosity in the way that you've structured your pay what you can friends. I love it. Pay what you can friends.
All this one right here.
Yeah. And, non-accessible is not acceptable. That's going to be a new motto that I'm going to work with as well, if I may.
Excellent.
Please,
Yeah,
yeah,
please
love
do.
it.
I mean, we're stealing Stephen's cannabis ceremony, so you
Yes.
could steal our not
Well,
accessible.
you're not stealing it. You got
Oh,
the
importing.
man,
We're
the
importing.
We're importing.
legend himself, who's going
Yeah.
to, stand and deliver. He might sit at some point, but I don't know. Not
Yes.
usually.
Although I hear we have to pay a little more because it's Canadian.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, no worries. It's copyright free.
Okay.
That's awesome. So I just want to thank you, Tom and Eden, for being who you guys are, the way you show up. It's just always such a pleasure to speak with you guys and get inspired. Tom, we want to come back and leave a little cliffhanger for people, because I want to do a show with you about the Leary files.
Sure.
Right. And we can, do something about what you're discovering in there. But we can, that's a cliffhanger for a later date for people who are watching. And
Sounds
Stephen,
good.
always a pleasure to have you hosting with me whenever we're doing what we do. Always a pleasure. And I want to thank everybody here in the community who took the time to join us in Zoom. Karen, Shannon, Vanessa, thank you so much. And we'll look forward to doing more of these in a way that we can invite our studio audience and our community to join us live in Zoom, so we can get community involved, so that everyone can be seen and be heard. So I thank you so much for the
Love
work
it.
you are
Thank you.
all doing.
Thank you,
Always-
Vanessa, Karen, and Shannon, also for your comments and questions.
Yes.
They were excellent. Appreciate it. Thank you.
There's Vanessa there. Hi, Vanessa. Hang
Yay,
on. I'm gonna
Vanessa.
spotlight you
Yeah,
there.
and Karen says,
Vanessa.
thanks
Hi,
for the
Vanessa.
fascinating conversation. Oh, there she is. Yeah.
She's gone.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone.
Flash in and out, yeah.
Exactly. Until
Alrighty.
next time, take care of yourselves and